I work for a trailer music production company, and the head of the company had this to say about my work.
And I can't help but feel that she said that because I derive inspiration from things like this. Storms. And since you're here, you obviously want to get feedback from your clients like that as well. So in this video, we're going to go over 3 actionable steps that you can take so that eventually you can get feedback like that, as well as getting more gigs so you can actually get paid for your work.
But before I explain what I mean, you can get Nimbus, which is the library I used in the queue that I got that feedback on, in the description box down below.
And I know it doesn't really make sense how a storm connects to music, let alone finding your unique style in music, but I promise it connects, and it's also my favorite way of finding my unique style. But stick around for step 3 because it's my favorite, it is more advanced, and not a lot of composers do it, so stay tuned for that.
There's so much that you can learn just from really listening to what you love listening to. So the first way that you can go about this is pick a genre you never get tired of. I just love deep house, so we're going to look at a few examples of that. So when I'm listening to the genre and I'm trying to pull out sonic moments that I can add to my cues, whether it's for trailer or for film score, 2 things that I'm hearing is that I love a good sidechain compression, and I love bending synths, and I love it when those 2 come together. The other way to go about finding inspiration from music you listen to is to pick one of the more niche genres that you love listening to. For me, it's experimental ambient music. And then once again, just finding sonic moments that you can pull from or inspiration that you can pull from. So let's take a listen to this track that I created, that took inspiration from experimental ambient music. So did you hear what made it unique? It's that weird like bubbling sound, right? It's almost atonal. I mean, not quite, but it's almost atonal. And what I did was I took a library by Heinbach, which if you're in the experimental ambient genre at all, you've probably heard of him. I took one of his sounds from one of his libraries, and I made that the signature sound of my cue. And speaking of Heinbach, this leads perfectly into our next tip. I've always loved composing, and I started out just on the piano and the cello and maybe a few like orchestral pieces and like Sibelius. But when I switched to a DAW, I was blown away with how many different sound libraries there are and how many different like sonic possibilities there are. Finding and using unique and underground sound libraries will effortlessly give you a unique and special sound to your scores, because everybody has certain preferences, right? And so like I explored before, I really have a preference for some of Heinbach's stuff. I love his stuff, and it's kind of set me apart in some of my trailer cues by using his experimental sounds. And you can do the same thing for your film scores or for your trailer cues. There's also this library called Dust that I love using either in place of my pianos or layering with my pianos. And once again, this just gives something refreshing to the ears to listen to, so it's not just the same basic felt or grand piano sound all the time. Which, don't get me wrong, there's so many good felt pianos and you really can't hate on a felt piano, but every now and then you do just need something just a tad bit more interesting. And once again, that can just add to shaping your unique sound as a composer. As I was honing my sound as a composer, I realized I wanted more unique pads in my collection, so I created Nimbus, which is a pad library made out of a bunch of really unique samples. If you want to add Nimbus to your collection, you can get it in the description box down below. And speaking of Nimbus, let's get back to our storm.
So what does a storm have to do with finding your original sound? Well, for me, it has to do with originality. You know those little like horse things that kids always play on that you rock back and forth on? Well, I hated those as a kid because I wanted the real deal. I wanted to be on a real horse. I wanted to be able to steer where the horse was going. I wanted the real original deal. And that craving for originality really has bled over into my work as an artist. So not only do I want my music to be original and my style to be original, I even want my samples to be original. So I've created my own sound libraries, and I've done that in one of two ways. The first way is sampling rain and thunderstorms, kind of like this one, although luckily it's not raining yet, and then turning that into tonal patches. Here's how.
First I recorded rain and thunder, and then I brought it into Cubase. Right now I'm looking through this audio file to find a part that I like. I wanted to find a nice thunder sound so I could create a rumbling type of patch. I like this part right here, so I'm going to pull it down to layer 1. And the reason why there are layers is that we're creating movement when we move the mod wheel. That way it's not just a stagnant sound and something actually happens when you move it. That's going to create a whole different world, and you probably really want that part of your Kontakt library. And we'll be able to create the mod wheel layers in Kontakt, but first we just need to create the audio file so we can actually create that in Kontakt. Next I'm going to use a equalizer on this sample right here, and what it's going to do is it's going to pull out the harmonics of any note that I choose. So if I choose C, it's going to pull out the C harmonic along with the rest of the harmonics that are part of the C note. So it's going to sound something like this. Sometimes I like to use 2 equalizers just so the harmonics are more prominent and it sounds even more tonal. And then once I do that, I like to experiment with effects, and usually I just slap on a ton of effects until it sounds like something I would want to have in one of my scores. Then for each time I export the sample, because we're going to export this audio file multiple times, I pitch it to every fourth. And I just do that for as many octaves as I want. So for example, I'll start on C2, then I'll pitch things to F2, then B2, then either to E or E flat or A flat, and so on. I don't always do like perfect fourths or fifths, but you can do that if you want. Generally fourths are a little better to go with if you're like replicating an actual instrument, but with something like this you can get away with a fifth because it's not a real instrument you're replicating, so there's nothing for the ears to really compare it to. And then finally, when you're exporting, make sure you name these really carefully. We'll need to know which like C or A our sample is and which layer it is, so when we bring it into Kontakt, we're not confused by a bunch of vague audio files. This is how I labeled mine for now. So we're finally ready to drag these files into Kontakt. You'll just create a new instance of Kontakt, double click the blank space, and it'll pull up a fresh new instrument for you to create sounds in. So now that I have this opened up, I am mostly going to be working in my group editor and my mapping editor. In the group editor, I'm going to create some extra groups, just some extra empty groups, and these are going to hold each of the layers that we created, so that way we have something that's happening when we move the mod wheel. So now I have these all named. You'll notice I have a few extra here that I didn't really go over. I just created another cello sound and a nice low synth sound to layer with it. And then we'll go over to the mapping editor, and this is where I can pull in my actual audio samples, and I'm going to align them with the keyboard. So for example, if I exported it as C3, I'll align it with C3, and then I can either stretch it up or stretch it down. Generally though, it's best to stretch samples down. Everything usually sounds better when it's pitched down instead of up. Now for this specific patch, because it's really abstract and not a real instrument, I can stretch these audio files as far across the keyboard as I want, and it'll still sound relatively good because once again this isn't a real instrument, so our ears aren't expecting to have like a real sound in a sense. So I'm going to stretch these a little farther than I normally would, and it'll still sound fairly good. And of course remember to separate them into groups by the layers you exported, set the mod wheel. You'll notice though on this one, they don't align perfectly, and that's because when I was creating this, I realized I wanted the samples to sit lower on the keyboard so it was a little easier to play. So like, this isn't a hard and fast rule that like C3 has to align on C3. It can align on like C2 or C4, for example. It's just really about, the names are really just to give you more of a general guideline of where you want things to be, and so that way you have in your head a reference of where the actual note was. And finally, if you want the sound to keep repeating, so you don't have to keep playing the note over and over again, so if you want like a nice pad, you can go over into the wave editor and you can set loop points there, which once again might be a little tedious because when you have many samples on many groups, you're going to have to set a loop point for every single sample on every single layer. I think I spent like literally a month straight doing it just for this library. It was a little much, but it turned out really well. And if you want a more in-depth tutorial, let me know in the comments. You can also go over to David Hilowitz on YouTube. I learned a lot from him, and he has some really great YouTube tutorials on how to use Contact and create Contact libraries. The other way I created my own sample library was through a slightly more traditional route where I was sampling real instruments instead of atonal sounds, and then I ran them through a tape player for an extra special warmth effect, and then I did the whole process over again with exporting it and bringing it into Contact, and I got something like this. If you want to try an easier version, you can just create your sound, make sure it's one note, put all the effects on you want on it, and then bounce it so you have a nice clean audio file, and then you can drag it into your DAW sampler. This will probably result in a slightly lower quality than something that you could make in Contact because it doesn't have the fading through like 3 layers and everything is stretched across the keyboard. So it might sound a little like lower audio quality, but some people might not mind that because it might just have like sort of like an 8-bit sort of quality sound, which some people might find charming.
Now, you might have noticed that sample libraries are a lot of work. Even just for that one patch, it took a while to make, and that was sped up too. And oftentimes composers, whether just starting out as being a composer, they're usually working a second job, and if they're a full-time composer, then they're really busy, so a lot of times composers don't have the time to make their own libraries. And luckily, if you're one of those composers, that patch that I made is available in Nimbus. I put together all the sounds that I collected from storms, from strings sampled through tape players, and I put that all inside of Nimbus. Virtually no one knows about Solstice Sounds or this channel, so this sound will still be unique to you because by the time I'm posting this video, probably like max 5 people have bought it. I don't have a budget for marketing, so it'll be still unique to you, and no matter what, how you use it will be unique to you as well. If you want to check off step number 2 and buy a unique sound library, that one is available for you to purchase.
Shaping your unique sound as a composer is really just leaning into what feels original to you and true to you. For example, my love of storms is original to me, and even my love of originality is original to me too, although neither of those are exclusive to me. Right? Those can be things that feel original to you as well. So really just lean in to genres that you really love, no matter how niche or how like opposite of film score or trailer cues they are. Lean into that and pick out the pieces that are your favorite and see if you can find a way to incorporate that into your scores and into your cues. If you've done all this and you're feeling pretty solid about where your sonic identity is laying, but you're still starting to feel a little terrified once you open the blank space of your DAW, you can go ahead and watch this video over here.